2 o'clock in the morning, me waking up thinking, well, I've done it. My honeymoon period of the school's over. They all hate me. That's how I felt about the staff at one point. And I think it's just been like, I don't know how anyone else has thought, but from January, it suddenly got ridiculous. Like there was suddenly a big change in the kind of what we were expected for. And what I like about my job is I can get really worried about it and then pass it to Emma and hope that she can then do it for me. That's basically the long and short of the plan. But I just wanted to go through very quickly what we're about in terms of teaching and learning, what our blended learning offer was before January, and then how we've changed. And hopefully it's probably a similar sort of thing you guys have gone through. So to start off with teaching and learning, I like to keep things simple because I'm a simple man, basically. I think if it's simple, people get it. And my wife's a primary school teacher, and she's so good. And she used to go to these kind of like lesson observations, and she'd say, well, I have this checklist of 40 things, and I don't know what I'm doing. And she just fundamentally forgets about actually teaching. And that's what I don't want to do with our staff. I want to keep it so simple that they know if you do these things, you'll walk out and we'll say nice things about you. And as a teacher, most of us, we're all basically geeks from school who want to be good, we want to impress, and we want to keep people happy. So when you get that positive feedback, you get the staff on board. So what we thought is, right, let's start off with an evidence-based approach with our teaching and learning, which is, I did like a kind of 4-page, I hate to say it was like a dissertation about, we are going to do direct teaching, because we believe direct teaching is the best way to teach. And although there's obviously going to be caveats within that, and there's times when it's better to do it the other way around, I like the idea of saying to staff, this is what we do here, and we want direct teaching because we believe that, and the evidence kind of says that this is a good model of getting independence at the end. So the way to kind of think about this is, it's kind of the I do, we do, you do, if anyone's ever heard that, you know, where the teacher does it first, you do it together to try and make sure there's no misconceptions, then they get on with it. Or another way we say it is, we model first, then do loads of question answering, and you don't set them off to independence until they actually can do it. Because when you set kids off to independence when they can do it, they just so happen to do it quite well. Whereas I still maintain, like, when you hear those lessons where they're like, I just kind of got them to learn about volcanoes first before anything else. And you listen in on some of the kids, and like the cleverest kids, like telling everyone that volcano lava is made out of like jam, and everyone's nodding. And you don't really hear that. And then suddenly that misconception is shared and it becomes the actual truth. And I really love the idea that the teacher still is a conduit for the learning. They're the beginning part. And the kind of bits that, if it was any kind of theory behind it, like I really like the Rosenshine Principle book by Tom Sheraton. I think that's really good. And I also like, who doesn't like Doug Lemoff? Who's with me? Because everyone loves Teach Like a Champion because it's easy and teachers can get it. So that's kind of what we believe in. We believe in direct teaching. And then when we did blended learning, we thought, what's the best model around about in June? What's the best model to make sure kids can learn online? And I don't know what anyone else thought, but when I saw the Oak Academy in England, I thought, yeah, that's the model. Yeah, that's brilliant, because it keeps in that idea that the teacher still has a power, where the teacher models exactly what they should do, and then the kids go off and do it. And there's a kind of, I thought, okay, how can we make sure we get the Oak Academy? Because we're not an English school. If anything, the kids don't really want to listen from teachers who aren't their teachers. So we went down this big idea of saying, can we create our own Oak Academy? And can we have, and the big goal was, could we have every single lesson online by the end of the year? So could we have a website with every single lesson online? Because if you have that, what I liked about that idea was you've actually got a legacy. So you come out of all this kind of lockdown stuff, and teachers don't feel like they've done all this work and it means nothing. There's something there you can say, well, from now on, whenever we say to a kid you're behind, we've got a video for it. Whenever you want to do homework, you've got a video, and it seemed like a good idea. And we also thought, why is this the best way of doing it? I don't know if anyone else thought, but the flexibility of a Loom video was brilliant, because it meant you could do it at any point, and if the computers at home weren't there, and what if teachers are ill, so you wouldn't have anyone to actually do it, and it seemed like the right model, and it was for the first term. And the worst thing about it, and we're about to talk about what happened in January, the worst thing is we were getting lauded for it. So when people say nice things about you, you start getting incredibly wedded to that idea. And you think, right, God, we've got the future here. We know exactly what we're doing. But the problem with that is when you think you know what you're doing, you kind of stop. And I would be on any conversation with anyone like saying, well, I'm definitely right because this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But did anyone else find January just like a real shocking moment? I felt like because I've got little children. So I decided to spend my Christmas, actually seeing my kids. I thought that'd be quite nice. And on top of seeing my kids, I thought, I need to make sure the testing's right, because that's going to be my next worry. And then the exams came out. I wanted to make sure that was right. So I got back on the first, and I definitely thought schools wouldn't close. I thought there's no way they're going to close again. So I got back on the first day of January, pretty smug with my little model. And I had just had shocking moments when I realised that the tide was turning. Firstly, my brother and sister were both heads, and I called them and I was telling them about my model, and my brother was like, "Why are you not doing live lessons? Like in England, we're just doing all live lessons." And I argued my point, and you know when you're wrong is when you aggressively argue your point, and then you get back the next day and think, "Oh, you know what? I've had a shocker here." And all the arguments I had for why Loom lessons were right were starting to go. So there was, first of all, I called them. Then did anyone get the Kirsty Williams tweet where she said, "I don't see why you can't do live lessons"? And then there was that Wales Online article where they basically said which schools are doing live and which aren't. And then there was Daily Mail comments, which I advise you never to go to if you're a teacher. And I felt, and then they changed the rules. So they said now you don't need to have one person in the class. You can do it from home. There's all these things you can now do. And the most important thing is I would always stick by a position if I could justify it. But we were finding with Loom videos, yes, it was great, but did we actually have the engagement? Did we know kids were doing it? And I think the problem was we couldn't prove that kids were doing it. And people in here might have found ways to prove that, but I just couldn't prove it. So this is the moment where we thought, oh God, well, I thought we were going to have to do a U-turn. And the worst thing about this, and this is why I share this as like a kind of group therapy moment, because I just felt really like I'm now going to have to go to my staff, who I've just been telling just how great they are. Like every email is, "Oh, you're amazing. It's gone really well. Everyone loves you." And I even emailed them a TES article that said, live lessons aren't as good as Looms. And I was so smug. I was like, we are not changing. And then on the Thursday of that week, I then had to go to Emma and say, actually, we're going to have to change. Like, we're going to have to change. And there are three things I just want to say before I go over to Emma. Firstly, the big worry for me is this isn't like one of those ones where you can do progressive change, where you can say, right, we'll get a few people to trial it and all this. Because by 5 weeks down the line, the ship has sailed. Like, and if you're not on it straight away, so this is not how you should do change management. Rather than doing all the kind of steps where you try and get people on board, this was like just suddenly going straight for the jugular saying, we have to change. So if you ever read that kind of, our iceberg is melting, there was this kind of moment where you say to the staff, this is what we've got to do. If we don't change this now, we're in trouble. And that's really worrying, because you worry, if I don't get buy-in here, this is the problem. And I think what we've learned from this is we've got to actually be reflective, and all of us right now probably think we've got a blended learning model that's good. And I think what we've got to always think to ourselves is, what's the next thing that can come along that's going to screw us over, and be ahead and be prepared to change? Because if you're not prepared to change, that's where it goes wrong. And the last thing I was saying is about calling other schools. So I called my old school, Cardiff High, straight away, and they had a great model. And the more people I spoke to, the better I realised what I wanted. And like I've always thought you have to speak to other schools, but if you don't speak to other schools in this bit, you can easily become a silo who think they're right, and then it all goes wrong. And then the last two things before Emma speaks is, I wanted to make sure if we add live lessons, there's two things. One, it has to be that we believe in what we're doing. So it has to follow this direct teaching model, because that's what we believe in. And secondly, it has to make sure it's actually good, because it was only about 3 weeks after my brother smugly told me about his live lessons that he then told me that and he was telling me that 80% of his kids are in there. He then told me, well, their cameras aren't on, so we don't actually know what they're doing. So we were saying, if we go in live lessons, then what is the purpose? The purpose is engagement, because that's the key. So if it's the engagement, then we have to see the kids' faces. And that's where I'm going to switch to Emma, if possible.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to pick up where Ines is left off and carry on with our story. So you've got the context of Loom lessons and the blended learning where we were. That morning, the Thursday morning, it was a very early conversation. I won't forget it. He was not my favourite person in the world at all. The head had made a massive U-turn, and then we had to implement live lessons. So this is what happened. This is how we did it. Thursday morning then we said, yes, we've got to do it. We knew we had to take the plunge, we knew we had to go in, we had to dive deep and do it quickly. So that Thursday, myself and digital coordinator, we had a look at the technologies and explored it really quickly. There are, as an incidental to this, some really funny recorded sessions where she and I were testing Google Meets with each other that someday I might actually share with people, that are quite funny as we're trying to work out how does this work. So that was very quick, in on it, focused. We then got together, we trained each of the heads of years because we were going for a staged approach on this, with a view that from the Monday morning, the 11th, so this was a Thursday, we trialed it the Thursday, we worked out how to use it. The Friday, we trained all the year tutors. We did 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. We did them in a batch through a Google Meet session. So we actually had them as the pupils and we ran the training session. That meant that we could then be in a position over the weekend to write a set of documentation, and that documentation I'll show you in a moment gave really clear big picture for the staff. What's the big picture? Why are we doing this? How does it fit into what we've been doing prior? We're not getting rid of the Bloom lessons on our website prior to that. This is a blended learning, pausing and planning and making sure our blend fitted our purpose of teaching and learning. So we trialled with the form tutors then from Monday the 11th. In the background, the executive head, Ines, and an assistant head were looking at the other element of this blended learning, is giving the pupils a timetable. We knew very clearly that our staff, and more importantly our pupils and their parents at home, could not manage and engage for 5 lessons a day of live lessons. That became really important to us. We wanted that concept of blend, of a teacher tutorial that they could have at any point and any time, a Loom lesson that would be on a timetable to help parents and pupils manage devices and manage their home environment and manage that learning. That was key to us. We then had, by the Wednesday, those timetables produced, ready for the pupils with their live lessons on, and we'd managed it so that pupils would get 2 to 3 live lessons a day in a whole range of subjects, okay? Interestingly, that came over 714 live lessons across a 2-week period for Key Stage 3 and 4. So that was on the Wednesday, the timetables were ready. The Thursday, Friday of that week, English, Maths and Science, the core teachers, we got them together, they trialled teaching those lessons for us, okay? And their little bit of feedback from them about the lessons, the do's and the don'ts and what went well, we fed back into our manual for teaching and learning, which again over the weekend was redrafted, ready for live lessons, all subjects, on the 18th of January, which was a week later. So we really did dive in, and we dived in quickly. We had that because we knew that it was right, but more importantly, what we had in the background is our learning and teaching model, which is, as Ines has said, is the I do, we do, you do. It's that teacher input, it's the modelling of the work. The pupils then have a scaffold to do something with to do something slightly independently, and then that scaffolding is reduced and diminished, so the pupils become more and more independent. Having that really clear teaching and learning model, which all our staff were very happy with, meant that for a live lesson then we could direct them to the technologies that meant that they could teach in the way that they were used to. So we weren't asking them to reinvent their teaching. We were saying, no, the Whitmore way is spot on. We believe in it, you believe in it, we know it works in the classroom. We're just going to transfer it by using a technology to make the Whitmore way happen remotely. So for me as a leader, I'm thinking, this is my school, Whitmore Way, we are going to transfer it to a virtual school. So all my information about teaching and learning policy, that very simple, clear diagram of the teacher input, pupils practicing with less support, just happened then to be transferred ready into this direct teaching online, okay? In the background, you're going to say to me, well, okay, how did you do that? So I'll show you the guidance in a moment, and the guidance again, 1 page, the big picture summary for teaching and learning. The second page is about the technologies, how do you do it? The go-to bits, how do I go on to Google Meets, how do I share my screen, how do I lock the classroom, how do I manage pupils coming in and out. And then about very important feedback from pupils from that first week of trial. We had some lovely, lovely comments on the stream from pupils and from parents as well in our email systems and our surveys that we went out to parents that were saying they really loved the live lessons and really liked that blend of lessons to allow them to manage it at home. Okay, so that was the week beginning the 18th, and boy, has it been a long term. This half term has felt like a whole year because we've done something within a short space of time that perhaps you would do ordinarily over a term or 2 terms. But we haven't stopped there. And what we've carried on doing then is, as staff have got better with the technologies, we've really shifted our focus into quality teaching and learning, and really making sure we're sharing that best practice and producing good learning experiences in our live lessons. Yeah, to a point where, of a twilight last week, we've been able to create a website about digital technologies and teaching and learning live lessons using short Loom videos from our staff of what they've been trialing in the last week and a half. Richard, do you mind if I just try and share the screen with everyone and have a look at the tab? Is that okay, folks?
Well, perhaps if I have the power. Oh.
Okay, that's I like that phrase. So let me see.
Just as you're doing that, Emma, what I really like about the website is, you know, teacher meets, they're always lovely, but they're always like, teachers will come up with something and you think, well, where does that fit into my teaching? And what Emma's done with this website is it all follows our teaching and learning process. But they know that when a teacher says, here's a Loom about how to do this, that fits into the I do section of the lesson. So they know that. So rather than it just being, here's a clever gimmick that you can add to your lesson, it's saying, how can you actually make that aspect of the lesson that's always our model better?
Yeah.
And you look, Emma?
Yeah, I'm just, oh, there we are, got it now, because I'd gone into it too late. Right, okay. Richard, you're going to have to be my wingman. Is that okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Lovely. So, folks, this is our Whitmore Learning and Teaching Blended Learning Training website. Okay. By the way, folks, can I please tell you that I am not an ICT teacher? Okay, so if you pick up anything from this, it is, if I can learn it, then and do it, then my staff can do it. That's the mantra I give them. We said that our live lesson should have this shape. The lesson entrance and do now, teacher input, checklist of the tasks, that's very short, but the key bits being teacher input, pupils working independently, and then feedback. And then with this website, then you can have a link to a different element of that lesson and take some advice from your peers as to how that lesson should look. So here's a bit of a selection of a PowerPoint that I gave to staff to advise them on the shape and the content of the lesson, and then some key points here to help them to structure and think about what should be in that content at that point. And then we go into little video clips, little looms, and you'll notice it's named after the staff because this is what the staff have trialled with over this last week and a half. So if we just go into SAFs, for example, SAF was using, now Richard, I don't know whether the sound will share on this. Have to remind me how you share the sound on Teams.
I think you have to do it from the beginning, if I'm a vague recollection, there was like a tick box, isn't there?
Yeah, let me go back to it. I always forget that on Teams. Let me try and share it again. Share content. Yeah. Oh, there it is, down the bottom left there. It's an odd place, isn't it? Or was that just me? Potentially it's just me.
It's all sent to try us, so.
There we are. Right, here's Saf. So
I'm going to talk to you today about Jamboard. So this is a program that I've been using with a lot of my classes, and it allows you to be able to see what they're writing as they're writing it. So I found this really useful because it allows you to see live how they're getting on. It also ensures that every single student is doing what they're meant to be doing. As I know, some of mine turn their mics off, turn their cameras off, and then I ask them a question and they're nowhere to be seen.
So from staff, she's showing us how to use Jamboard, which you found particularly useful for making sure in that independent section of the lesson, that key part, that's the I do, you can really focus and make sure that the pupils are contributing and quite clearly and importantly pick up any misconceptions. This is Dan from the feedback section who's been using Moat, and those of you who are on Twitter will notice that quite recently Hub allowed Moat to be accessible through your Hub Cymru account, which is fantastic. And if we just listen to Dan and how he shares, just a quick snippet.
Hi Whitmore. Back in early January, I had an email sharing a new Chrome extension called Moat, and it is a game changer. So I just want to share with you how I've used Moat, and Mr. Gamble's used Moat as well, and I know other members of the science department are all using it as well. So there's different ways you can use it. All of them will save you time, all right, and effort. So let me just share with you this exchange between Mr. Gamble and Ed Beer in year 12. So Ed struggled with a question, and to give feedback or to explain how to do this would have involved Mr. Gamble either having to go to create a short loom or spend ages typing out an explanation. So let me just show you quickly what he did.
All you've got to do for unknown A, you need to work out the empirical formula, okay? And that'll give you the simplest ratio of atoms in that compound, so the C to H to N ratio, so you divide each of those percentages by.
Okay, now I'm not going to show you the whole clip and bore you with it, even though I find it interesting, you probably won't. So he explained it in great detail to Ed. Ed knew exactly what to do from that, and then I want to share with you Mr. Gamble's feedback once he's marked the piece of work.
Hi, this looks great. First page, perfect, with mass spectrometer, great, and then even your isotopic abundance brilliantly as well, with good justifications too, to suggest what the different things are, and working out the 81%.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to you now. I obviously sped that up a little bit because for the purposes of it, so you can get to the point where you're hearing how they're using Moat. The point being that actually the website here is about training the staff and giving them the guidance and the information that they need in a one-stop shop. So while we're actually having a virtual school, this is their virtual training as well. So there's our documentation about the guidance, questions about safeguarding, about the structure of the lesson and the elements that we should be having there. And then there's more detail here in each of the pages on what really staff should use as key points for teaching and learning, yeah, that fits with our learning and teaching model. And then here's their advice as little Loom videos on how to actually use that technology. Now, this is ongoing, and even last night, and I haven't had a chance to upload it, I've had 2 more, particularly from some other lovely members of staff, about how they've shared their PowerPoints with pupils and how they've used visualizers as well to give feedback and to also direct the teaching and learning. So
and can I just throw one thing in here just quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
Right, so this is like going kind of backwards, because like, you know, when a thing is on fire, you've got to go for quite a direct type of leadership where you say, this is what we're doing it. So for example, you know, if a school was like in special measures and it was about to be closed, you have to say, this is what we're going to do. And a bit like this with in this situation, we had to go to live lessons, so therefore we had to be quite directive. But now what Emma's done with this website is it takes the power back into the staff, so it's the staff training each other, and you're getting that buy-in from staff. So if we carried on with a very direct model, so if all those videos were of Emma saying, here's something you must do, here's another thing you must do, after a while staff will get bored of that. But I think you can get away, that people always are so scared, you've got to be collaborative at all times. But it's much easier to be collaborative once you've been given a base starting point. And I think it's our job as leaders to give them the vision, give them the base starting point, and then say from that, be collaborative. It's a wee bit like the new curriculum, and I'm not saying anything disparaging, but it's when you try and completely set for something from start and there's no real where you're going from, what ends up happening is a lot of confusion. Whereas sometimes if you say, right, this is what it is in general, right, now debate that thing, that's sometimes easier. And I think that's kind of the way we've gone for, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where we are at this point. And a background to that, just to give you a bit of outline of other things that I felt were really important to make sure that we got our blended learning right. There was lots of information and feedback to parents. So every week, ready for the Monday, there would be a letter for each year group to say what is the work on either the blended learning website or the live tutorials to really guide parents, something that could be printed out, stuck on the fridge. There was also very much a timetable sent out to each pupil so they knew their live lesson and when they're supposed to be working on their loom. Each form teacher has contact on a daily basis with the form through a Google Classroom and a Google Pastoral Meet, and within there we're able to give them top tips on how to use the technology as well, because that's really key, isn't it? The pupils don't necessarily know how to use this technology and parents don't, and on our main school website we've created lots of how-to videos for pupils and lots of how-to videos for staff. So as well as you're training the staff, you're also training the pupils and you're training the parents as well. Yeah, who knew we were going to use Google Meets? Importantly as well is also those problems, that feedback mechanism from your stakeholders to say, actually, how is it going? What can we do to improve? So we have a Google form that we send out on a regular basis and to parents, and that's helped us tweak and refine our delivery. It's not perfect, but we're moving it forward as well, and the things that they see at their end we can tweak our end. We also have a team of admin staff who phone home every day for students who are not able to access those live lessons to try and find out and unpick the reasons why, whether it's lack of device, lack of knowledge, whether it's just somebody in the home environment, they can't work on a live lesson for that time. And we also have a report a problem page on our main website. So if parents and pupils have a technological problem, they don't know how to do something, they've lost their hub login, they've lost their password, 24/7 they can put in a Google form that gets picked up by myself and the digital team, which sounds very grand, but it isn't. It's just me and two others, and we just work together, and it's a bit like a kind of remote 24/7 IT support network, and we give a lot of one-to-one support to the parents to a point where we can be phoning them up over the phone and guiding them through the technology, how to do it, and then actually at the same time emailing the staff to see if the child's got into the live lesson. So what I'm saying is, please don't think, couple of things. Please don't think that we are perfect in what we're doing. We know we're not. But what we certainly did do in a very short space of time is change our approach. And we changed our approach because we needed to, and we could see the reaction that was coming from parents and the wider community. We absolutely believe we are right, and I stand by that it must be blended learning, a mixture of teacher tutorials and the live lessons to give parents and pupils that time to manage their learning at home, to manage the number of devices, to manage the number of children in the home, and our parental feedback is definitely supporting us in what we're saying. You do have to think about ways of training your staff and training and supporting your parents and the pupils, and that dialogue between home and school is certainly never more important than it is now, and we are at that point loving it. And I'm going to stop there now because we potentially are going to run out of time, and you might want to ask something, and I'm more than happy for any questions. All
yes,
right.
and just before we say this, this is the first time I've ever done what you'd like, if you're a business studies teacher, which I am, it's like a kind of soft launch where you launch something that's not ready, and then you try and get it better as you go along. And there's real benefits of doing a soft launch in that you get going straight away. But the downsides of the soft launch, if anyone's, bear with me on this, there was a computer game that came out recently called, I can't remember what it's called, like Cyberpunk or something. And they needed it out because they needed it before Christmas. So they did a soft launch, they got it out, and it had loads of glitches. And the problem was that meant that everyone got on there saying, this is rubbish, and then they were ruined. And that was the real risk in what we've done, in that if we'd done this soft launch and kids had disengaged and said, this is not worth it, how do you get them back when you've done that launch? And that was our worry. So on the first day, we had 50% attendance. And then the next day, we had 60% attendance because we called every kid who didn't turn up. And the next day, after calling every kid who didn't turn up, we had 70% attendance. And now, in 3 year groups last week, we had 82% attendance and overall 76%. And that's gone from, and that's just because we're persistent. And when it wasn't right, and what I think is really important to staff is that message to staff is, we're asking you to do a lot of things here, and we apologise for that. But we're not asking you to be perfect. So I like the idea, like I had some absolute shockers on this sort of thing. And I like the idea of sharing these moments because staff need to know We're not having to go at you for not being perfect. We just want you to try. And I think that message kind of helped. So am I saying this is always, will I always go for this soft launch approach? Probably not, because if it goes wrong, what do you do when, that was our biggest worry. What do you do if you go live and then it doesn't work? Where's your backup position? And that is always the fear. But we're okay for the minute. Last thing I was going to say before we let you on to things is, I think the big question is what we do next. You know, you've got all these skills of this staff who now know how to do something. I mean, I used to be in charge of digital stuff at Cardiff High, and I always said, is technology going to be the new colouring in? Like, who knows, on a Friday afternoon, right, back in the day when I still taught loads, what was the one thing you could never get on a Friday afternoon? You couldn't get a computer room, because everyone was like, right, book the computer room. And they'd be like, make a PowerPoint on whatever, it didn't matter what it was. And then the teacher sat back, had a little cry or a little bit of a sleep because they were tired, because it was the end of the week. And what happens if you give that power to teachers every single day and go, because what we're thinking about is going one-to-one and having a Chromebook for every kid. But if we're going to do that, we better make sure that we know what we want the lessons to be like. Or could it just become the new colouring in? And you walk past every lesson and every kid is researching. And you think, oh no, not the research. So that's the question. I think will be an interesting discussion, because we think we can afford to go one-to-one, don't know how, and whether that's the right thing to do or not. Great, Richard, I think we're good.
Thank you both very much. I'm just going to stop the recording, and we'll see if there are any questions. It's handy. The stop button doesn't work. Stop recording.